Hey guys, Chris Murphy here. I'm here with the lovely Jane Tepley. How you doing, Jane?
Hi, Chris.
And Jane is a mind mastery teacher, works for
That's
Modern Warrior Mind.
Yeah, that's right. Mind mastery and meditation.
Excellent. And Jane's very well recommended in the industry by a few of the top coaches I've worked a bit closer with. More focusing on strengthening your mind, your mindset, making you a lot more confident mind, being firm in your decisions. I think not caring too much about what people think and having your, based on your beliefs, what you want out of life. So really look forward to asking you a few questions today, and I think you can help a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about integrity and about acting accordingly with what you believe in, and also just standing your ground. When people are trying to push you around and trying to enforce things on you, if those things don't feel right, it's good to have the strength of mind to be able to say no. Not in a nasty way, but I think this world would benefit if more people acted with integrity.
No, definitely. And I caught up with Jane, what was it, like a few weeks ago. I think we were just going to catch up for a quick coffee, but we were chatting for hours because I was just so interested in a lot of the stuff that you were saying. And I think what you helped me with a lot was help me understand a lot of human behaviours, why people behave the way they do. Maybe people who are quite passive aggressive, people seem quite angry, the people that I would probably go in and speak to. And one happened actually before. There was this this convention going on in Soho, and there was a DeLorean, and there was Ghostbusters car and stuff.
No, it's
and
okay.
And one guy said to me, I was like, "Can I get pictures?" Like, "Yeah, sure, man." And then the other guy had the Ghostbusters car. He was in the car, and I was like, "Oh, can I get a quick picture in the car?" And he was like, "No." He's like, "No, because everyone will want to do it." And he was just this really negative energy. And I thought for a split second, oh, he might be joking. And I'll test it a bit here. And that's where this thing we call frame control, where you're sort of non-reactive to what he's doing. But in my head, a lot of the time in the past, I've always thought, why are people like that? Why do they act that sort of way? How come people are different, essentially?
What do you mean different as in their mental setup?
Yeah, in their mental setup. So you obviously, people are scared to go out and speak to people because some people might be quite negative.
Right, okay. So the reason why some people get nervous talking to other people, and they can't really find it in them to go and to speak, or especially to speak on stage, for example, to do some public speaking, is because the way we interact between each other, we always send and receive energy at all times. And now, I know some people say, oh, it's some sort of spiritual stuff. Well, it's not really, because it's the underlying basics of our interaction is what we are wired into as human beings, and we all share that. So whether you choose to acknowledge that or not, it's up to you. However, it's not going to disappear, it's going to stay there. So because we all send and receive energy pretty much like radios, so because of that, if a person feels that they're not strong enough within themselves to react adequately if someone fires negative energy into them, that could actually be quite damaging or quite painful in a way, well, at least emotionally. You know how, I don't know if you've experienced that yourself, but I think some people could relate. If you go and talk to someone and they get really angry with you or really hateful, then it feels almost like if they hit you, it actually feels painful. Something inside you literally shrinks when that happens. And what it is if they fire some negative energy towards you, and it could be simply because they had a bad day, so it doesn't necessarily have to be personal. When that happens, if you have a strong energy shield around you, it will just reflect it back, and you will stay pretty much as you were. But if, and this is the case with most people unfortunately, if your energy muscle, so to speak, is not trained, that blow can potentially go straight in and affect you on so many different levels. And because it's painful, many people subconsciously don't want to go there. You see, because talking to someone else in the street or talking to someone else at a party potentially may mean this kind of a reaction. And because it hurts, it's like you wouldn't cut yourself with a knife just because, wouldn't you? So people subconsciously try to avoid this kind of, well, a potential danger. So a good way around it is, which could be actually almost counterintuitive in a way, because it doesn't involve you doing things as much as actually thinking about things and analyzing things. So if you do some soul searching, some meditation, and you find what it is within yourself that actually makes you more exposed, more vulnerable to this kind of, well, energy attacks, so to speak, then you can work on it, you can strengthen that part. And then what happens is, if your energy level is higher than the level of energy of a person you're talking to, you're going to influence them and not the other way around. So you can actually create a situation where you're talking to someone and they're not really that happy, but because your energy is stronger than theirs, you influence them, so they start smiling back and they start feeling better.
Yeah.
And with the moment when you have that power, suddenly there is no problem interacting with anyone, because your mind says, well, fine, we're safe now. There is no problem at all. So that subconscious block disappears. And suddenly, for example, a person who had a fear of public speaking could just go on stage and enjoy himself. And it's actually really, really interesting, because I've seen that happening many times. I've seen that happening sometimes at my workshops, for example, where we were doing some meditation work, and we've removed some sort of a block within that person's mind. And suddenly, they had all the confidence they needed, just there on the spot. And you think, well, it's some sort of a miracle or a trick. No, it's not. It's just the way our mind works. So the way we interact with people is based on the structure, on the patterns in our mind. And what happens is, you can change those, you know? They're yours to change, to play with, to adjust the way you want. And with the moment someone actually takes a conscious step to change something, to fix something, the mind just obviously obeys, well, for a while anyway. And then suddenly the block they used to have dissolves, and the attitude that they could not display before because of the block suddenly comes to the forefront and suddenly becomes available to them. So a good way of thinking about it is, think of your mind as a really tough manager, and think of all your attitudes and all your thoughts and all your actions during the day as a set of tasks or projects. And your energy available to you during the day is your budget. So the mind is a really tough manager, and it looks through the tasks and says, well, we've got a budget for this, 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 and this. And obviously this would be some life-sustaining things that you have to do, like you have to eat, you have to drink, and so on. But everything that goes beyond that scope would actually be put on hold or cancelled straight away. And because it happens on the subconscious level, most people don't realize what's going on. So you can notice it yourself. Let's say with the moment you're getting more and more tired, then progressively the amount of things that you can and want to do suddenly goes down and down and down. So let's say if you're a little bit tired, then you may not feel like exercising. But then if you're tired a bit more, you may not feel like getting up and doing anything at all. Then later on, you may not even feel like talking to anyone if you're that tired. And then later on, you're not even bothered to listen to anything, because that takes energy as well. So you can observe your mind and see how it cuts down all the things that are not related directly to some life-sustaining activities. So what happens is, because of the way we manage our energy during the day, we are basically chronically low on energy. Well, the majority of us anyway. So what happens is, the mind will not let you do things that are outside of that scope that it holds, so to speak. And yes, obviously with your willpower you can override that and you can do things despite it, but that requires certain discipline and, as I said, certain willpower. So if someone is not aware of what's going on, they would find it really difficult to break free from that subconscious cage of the allotted or allowed behaviors. So this is what happens. Basically, the mind assesses the level of energy of that person and says, right, well, we don't have enough energy to execute this task. It's cancelled. And it will not let them go any further. And as I said, with willpower and discipline, obviously you can override that. But for a general person, general guy, general girl, they would probably be just stopped in their tracks and think, oh no, I can't do that. And the problem is, again, that as soon as that develops, then we like to label that. And in our society, it's usually labeled as shyness, for example. So if you don't have the energy to overcome a certain block, then you're a shy person. Now, with the moment that you believe you're a shy person, then you behave like a shy person, then you have yet another obstacle to overcome, which is now your own belief that you're shy. So you can see how these patterns are created, and all it takes is basically just looking into your mind, searching it through, seeing those patterns and overcoming them or overriding them, which is perfectly possible. We can do pretty much anything with our minds if we put our mind into it. If we have the right amount of willpower. Actually, I do have just a side note. There is a free willpower report people can download from my website. You can put the link.
Yeah, definitely. Later.
Because actually, no strings attached. It's completely free. You can go and download it. What it is, it shows you how to get the willpower you need to conquer your mind.
Okay, all right. So you can see, guys, like Jane obviously knows her stuff, and it's more in detail of explanation, and I think it helps a lot for me. I feel like with a lot of us, we kind of want to understand the why, and you talked a lot about weakness and energy levels, but what you say is these people that perhaps you go up to and they're quite negative, or people who are influencing people, their decisions, and they're quite negative, they're weak-minded, as I think you told me. They sort of thrive on bringing other people down and energy. So what's the sort of explanation behind that? Why are people like that, and why do they go about their every day trying to bring other people down?
Well, to keep it short, because we are chronically low on energy, the majority of us, for various reasons, our lifestyle, the place we live, the place, the way we eat, the way we sleep, and all those things obviously to blame, and lots of stresses as well. So what happens is some people are naturally a bit stronger than others, and some people are weaker, and it has nothing to do with any kind of equality or inequality. It's just, some people are naturally born stronger, and it is what it is. So those who are born stronger obviously can take a bit more. But people who actually need to put more effort into developing their power, and because it's not really easy, well, in our society anyway, do we really have schools how to develop your mind power? Not really. I don't think there are many. This is why I'm running one, for that reason. But what I'm saying is, the majority of people need to put more effort into developing their strength, and then the strength will work for them. But what happens is, if for whatever reason they were not given an opportunity, or it just didn't happen, then if they get hit constantly with some life circumstances, or with people's reactions, or with anything negative that is happening in their lives, then at some point it can really traumatize them to the degree where the level of energy really, really drops, but not just drops, it stays there. So it doesn't restore itself. And when that happens, they start feeling quite bad, obviously, and then they struggle even with everyday tasks. Now, the subconscious way around it is, unfortunately, to take energy from someone else. And unless we're aware of it, and if we're in that situation, it's what's going to happen. So the natural subconscious reaction of a person who is struggling to keep their energy level up is to launch onto someone else and rob them of energy. And the reason, obviously, why they want to do it is because they want to function normally again, but also because it's so easy to do. Now, if you are trained in mind mastery and a person like that attacks you, there is nothing they can do really unless you allow them to. But the majority of people are not trained, and that makes them unfortunately easy targets. So what happens is, if an energy sucking person approaches them, and usually what they're after our emotional reaction. So what they do, they try to push some buttons to make you react emotionally. So it could be, let's say, an unfair accusation. It could be a plain insult. Just anything that would trigger you to become angry or annoyed. And this is one side of it. So it's an explicit, the so-called solar type of those kind of people. And what they do, they just start being nasty and rude to you for no apparent reason. They can actually push you sometimes as well, if they're not getting enough reaction. And it's all just to make you feel angry. As simple as that. As soon as you're angry, what happens is, as I said earlier, you release like a wave of energy that flows out of you. And those people absorb it straight away. And as they absorb it, it makes them feel much, much better. And they can function again for a time, normally. And they can actually then come to you and apologize and say that they didn't mean it, for example. But the thing is, they will do it again and again and again, and it's quite exhausting because, you know, being constantly robbed of energy when you don't have even enough yourself can be quite taxing. And there is also another type which I would say almost plagues life coaches and therapists and all people like that, because another type of energy suckers is the so-called lunar type. And they're not aggressive, they're not loud, they're not vulgar. They're actually really nice and really sweet. And they come to you saying, oh, you're the only person that could help me. And I need your help so badly. You can't possibly, you can't say no, really, because it would seem really horrible and nasty of you. So they start telling you all about their lives and how horrible they've been mistreated, and they may actually start crying as well. The reason why I'm talking about it like that is because it's almost like a performance. It's a play. And yeah, obviously they would generally feel in the moment sorry for themselves, but what happens is they're not actually asking for your advice. They want your energy. And as soon as you open up and say, oh, you poor thing, they're like, okay, thank you, that's good. And they absorb your energy, and you can see how suddenly they come more and more alive and become more and more happy. And the problem is, they will never take your advice. This is what sets them apart from people who are genuinely looking for your help. Because if someone really wants help and you say, well, okay, I see that's a bit hard. So what you can do is this, and this. And then you call them a week later and you say, well, what have you done? And they say, well, I've tried this and I've tried that. This worked, this didn't. And it's all fine. But if that person is an energy sucker, what they will say, oh yeah, well, I didn't really have a chance yet, or I wasn't inspired, I didn't feel like trying, or there were some problems that stood in the way. Whatever the story is, they will never act on any of your advice. So this is how you can tell that this person is basically robbing you of energy, and it's not a good thing to allow to happen. Now, it almost sounds like, oh yeah, but you're depriving them of food. Yeah, but you should not make yourself into food for others. And helping others is one thing, but letting them use you is another thing. And again, you see, if someone is trained in mind mastery, A, he would recognize those behaviors straight away. B, he would know how to help those people really. For example, if those people are your friends or family, you actually do want to help them. You don't want just to push them away. So you know how to help them, you know how to recognize them, you know how to protect yourself. And this is why it's so important to train your mind. I think it's more important than probably has ever been in human history, because our life is at such a fast pace. We are so bombarded with stresses and challenges and demands that we need that strength so badly. So I think people are actually learning to meditate, and I mean learning to meditate properly. I'm not saying sitting on your couch for 30 minutes, getting insanely bored and trying to count your breath. No, I mean training meditation as a martial art is just so important and so beneficial for people.
No, absolutely, and a lot of what Jane said, I think, particularly when you're saying about the type of person who, you know, they come over and they probably act like your best friend. And I think what you've got to do is you said part of mind mastery is going with your instincts. And you mentioned about these people targeting life coaches. So I can obviously say when I started this off, it happened a lot more. And I think when those people come in now, it's like, no, go away. And I think whenever everything seems too good to be true, it's like, beware of those come bearing gifts. These people who come like, they're your best mate straight away. If you think to how you probably formed your best friend in the first place, it probably wasn't like that. And you said about mind mastery is going with your instincts. If straight away you think there's something not quite right about this person, but he seems like he's going to say solve all my problems, and you have to go with that instinct. And you said basically your mind's that weak that it will sort of maybe see past that and takes a chance, whereas you've probably already got the reference point of this has happened before. And you used this analogy, didn't you, of like people are walking around and they're like a house, but the front door's open, the windows are open.
Yeah, exactly. The windows and the front door is up.
And anyone can walk in. And I think once people walk in, they then can sort of control you in a way, can't they?
Oh, absolutely.
And you can't actually get, as you said, the only way to get past it is basically by throwing them out. And that is by obviously avoiding contact with people. So it's a good analogy, and maybe some people might be scratching their heads, but I think this happens all the time. People have always got people around them, more or less, you know, who aren't strengthened in their mind. Maybe it's their parents and other people who are sort of controlling them. Because this is an important point I want to mention. You was talking about society in terms of, and we were joking the fact that people believe once they get to say 30, they have to get married, they have to settle down, they have to have a job, they have to buy a house. And me and you are sort of like, now we just think that's crazy. But most people still believe that, don't they? And you know, I think a lot of it is to do with parents and society.
Yeah, it's a part of the social conditioning, obviously. So what happens is when kids are born, little babies are born, instantly they're surrounded with all the information and conditioning and knowledge and everything that their parents, friends, and everyone else around basically carries in their minds. They're surrounded with it almost like with a cloud. You can imagine it that way. And what happens is they absorb it subconsciously without realizing what's happening. And then when that happens again, and as they grow older, they carry those bits of conditioning, they carry those seeds within themselves. And yet again, as I said, if they don't do meditation and soul searching and mind mastery, what happens is they would often accept those things as their own beliefs, and they would fight for them. Some people would even die for them, sadly. Not even realizing that those goals, those beliefs, those ideas are not even theirs. They just pick them up from someone else. And this is why we talk about fake goals, and we talk about the middle age crisis, when people realize, or some people do anyway, that everything they've been striving towards till this moment was effectively someone else's ideas about how life should or must be. And then when they realize that, they think, well, so I've spent 30 years or 35 years of my life for what? Just chasing other people's ideas. And this could be avoided. You see, this doesn't need to happen. We don't need the middle age crisis if we start doing it quicker and if we become more aware of the contents of our own minds. So, for example, it's good to do soul searching and see whether those bits of conditioning or ideas or anything, actually is congruent with our inner essence. And this is why I said acting with integrity would save you from so many troubles and so many mistakes that you won't believe. And some people say, oh yeah, but it's hard to be honest. No, when you think of the price you have to pay for not acting with integrity, you realize that actually it's better to do that, and it's easier to do that. It's just put your priorities right. So if you can find what you stand for and see if what is in your mind aligns with those values, then suddenly things become much, much easier, much more transparent. So, you know, for example, if someone is trying to impose a goal or an idea on you, that you're not going to buy it because it's not congruent with your inner values, it's not congruent with your integrity. And even if somehow that little seed of doubt or some ideas somehow finds its way into your mind, because it's going to be so different from the rest, you can see it straight away. So you will not act upon it unless you want to, but at least you will not be compulsively acting upon it, because unfortunately one of those things we do, we don't tend to answer or respond, we tend to react to things. And this is what puts us into trouble so many times. So if something happens, if we think of something, if we feel something, we just react to it straight away. And well, if it's our true desire, if it's our real thought, then it's probably not as bad. But if it's a thought that is brought from somewhere else and we react on it, it can potentially actually ruin our life. And I've seen some people doing just that. So learning to observe the content of your mind without responding to it automatically is a really, really good skill to have. And again, it's developed through meditation. So when you see something that is not quite right, that doesn't feel quite right, just trust your instinct. Don't try to justify. Don't try to create some sort of a mental construct saying, oh yeah, but you see, if you just do that, then hopefully this and hopefully that. No, just say no to things that don't feel right. Even if the problem is as well that our mind is a bit like the camera. One of those horrible cheap automatic cameras that focus on the closest thing to them rather than on some actual interesting things. So let's say you want to take a picture, well, what happens is it just focuses on your finger. And most people's minds do just that. So what happens is they focus on the gain at hand rather than on a long-term goal. And this is why so many people get put off track. For example, they're trying to quit smoking, or they're trying to be on a diet, but the cake is right there, the cigarette is right there, and the temptation is stronger than the ultimate goal, because the mind focuses on that and everything else goes out of focus and everything else becomes fuzzy and blurry. So what is important to think about is when you've got that integrity, it will not allow you to sleep, because the goal far in the distance would be more in tune with your actual essence and what you want to achieve as a human being than this cupcake right now, or this cigarette right now, or this glass of wine right now. Because you think, well, it's not who I want to be, it's not me. So suddenly you become much more resistant to temptation in a natural way, and it's not really a struggle. I mean, what happens is, if you act with integrity, if you know what you stand for, certain things just stop being temptations. They're not temptations anymore, because they're so at odds with what you want to be and how you see yourself as, that you don't need to struggle to overcome them, simply because they're not even in the scope of your interests. So this is how, the more you change the structure of your mind, the stronger it becomes. In a strange way, it actually helps you out. So first you work for it, but then it works for you.
Okay, I think that was very interesting what you meant. I think I resonate a lot with that. I think we talked about this last time, that it's just strength on standing by your decisions. I think what makes you a confident person is you make a decision and you stand by it. Whereas most people will be like, yeah, I'll quit smoking, and then they start smoking and they don't quit. Whereas the confident, the real strong-minded person would be like, I'm quitting smoking, and then they quit smoking.
Yeah, and they never touch a cigarette ever again.
Yeah, and I feel like my development over the last few years is like everything I've said I'm going to do, I've gone out and done it. And I think that's what builds your confidence. Whereas most people, perhaps you phone someone up and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, and they don't. So you're saying those people are more weak-minded, and the people who stand by their decisions are confident. So this kind of all relates to, I mean, in a way of talking about confidence, because people will walk around saying, I want to be more confident, I want to be more confident. So how do you best think that relates to mind mastery? Is it about those decisions, or is it about the meditation side? Or
okay, so just to be clear, meditation is just a tool. It's something you master your mind with. It's just some sort of technique. Well, so meditation is a tool that helps you analyze the contents of your mind, amongst others, and modify it in the way you want it to be. And it should be seen as such. So when people say, oh, I just meditate just because, and there is no goal in mind, then obviously their meditations become not really successful, and it's more difficult for them to concentrate. So actual confidence, the way I see it, is being in tune with your actual self, with your true, real self, with your real essence. Because if you are in tune with your essence, and you know your strengths and your weaknesses, and you are at peace with them, so there is no self-denial, there is no like, oh, I don't want to see that, it's not good enough. What happens is, the stronger your mind becomes, the more control and the better grip you've got on your ego. And then you can actually even turn it down or turn it off. And basically what happens is, many people's so-called confidence is based on some sort of an ego trip. And I know it sounds horrible, but what happens is, because ego seeks validation at all times, they start doing things just to prove that they can do them. And the way you can tell those people apart from people who have true confidence is because people who have true confidence are always very quiet and very peaceful. Think about it. Think of a huge predator, like a dog, or a huge dog, or a tiger. They're very calm.
Yeah.
They have nothing to prove. They don't need to prove anything. They're strong and they know it. And this is the strength that flows from within. So if someone is truly confident, he doesn't need to prove to everyone that he can do things. But if something is obviously necessary, he can go ahead and do them. So, for example, he wouldn't jump to the forefront saying, oh yeah, me, I can do everything. But if, for example, if the situation calls for it, he will say, yeah, okay, I can do it. I can take responsibility. I'm strong enough to do it. And people subconsciously recognize that. They actually know it, and they value it so much better than the mask of confidence, which unfortunately I've seen a lot in the PUA world. What happens is, a guy goes there and says, well, I don't have enough confidence to, let's say, to talk to girls. And they say, well, what do? If you develop this flashy mask, then nobody's going to see that you're not confident and you're sorted. And I've seen many people who do just that. So they develop some sort of a mask and they hide behind that. But the problem is, it's almost like painting a building that has cracks in the walls. The cracks actually need to be filled in and restored because it's structural damage. Painting over them doesn't actually help. And what happens is, under the glossy facade, that weakness and fear and everything else keeps bubbling up, just there under the surface. And because now the person feels that they have overcome those problems, they don't do anything about them, or at least they're not inclined to do anything about them in a natural way. And that is damaging them, sadly. And this is why I think as a dark side of PUA, not because, it's what we need to do, we do need that confidence, but we need to develop it rather than fake it. And I think the reason why I said this, the dark side, is because if someone believes they have dealt with something, they're not going to look into it again. Also because their ego will not allow them to look back, because it's like, but I'm perfect now. I've paid so much for my trainings and I can talk to anyone, but they still shrink inside. Inside they're still those vulnerable guys as they were when they first came into a seminar room, for example. And what happens is that fake confidence, which we see loads of, that fake confidence creates problems for those people, because as their ego seeks more and more validation, they sometimes are being pushed to more and more, obscene almost behaviors, just to prove that it's something they can do. Or they can be pushed into dangerous things which are completely unnecessary. Certain things, actually, some people died just climbing skyscrapers, for example, and it's not necessary for a healthy and fulfilled life. It's not necessary for happiness. It's just when you see people doing things that are over the top and completely unnecessary, it means that unfortunately they have this deeply rooted problem which they're trying to cover up, and they're trying to cover it up with their own behaviors, but pretending to themselves that they're strong because they can feel that it's not quite right. So because of that void, they seek more and more and more validation just to prove themselves that the problem is not there. But because the problem is there, it keeps pushing them into those behaviors, which sometimes can be quite damaging. And also for the PUA community specifically, what I've noticed, and some people actually did admit it.
Yeah, because you talk a lot about this because you've actually helped a lot of guys.
I do.
And it is that thing, and it's very much like an ego thing, I guess. And I think the thing with me is there isn't really an ego there, so I guess that's where I probably didn't really fit into that anyway. But
no, that's good for you. Good for you.
But you said it's always to do with deeper rooted issues, like because when sometimes you meet people and they brag about stuff, and then they need that validation.
Yes.
It's like, and I admit I'm awesome, and you're like, well, why do you need that? And you even said like you want your mentors to be strong, like they're all calm. No, if second someone's passive aggressive, you shouldn't really be looking up to this person.
Well, exactly.
You should
it means
be
that they're struggling with something unresolved.
Yeah. And it rubs off on you as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Because I had some people like this in my life, and then I cut them all out, and it made me a lot stronger because I felt a lot more powerful. I felt, this person, because they're like they said, some people are faking it in a way as well.
Yeah.
People make stuff up. It's crazy, isn't it, to think. You think, why would you lie? Because I always remember back in school and stuff, there'd be like kids saying, oh yeah, I've completed like all these sticker books, or I completed all the computer games, and I've got all the computer games and stuff like that, and you'd be like, it's obviously not true. Or it'd be like, I was around your house, that's not true. And you're like, why are you lying? So this is always a thing. It's not being comfortable.
Validation, not feeling comfortable about who you are. And the thing is, and it's, I think, good news for everyone, once you really get to know yourself genuinely on a deeper level, you understand how absolutely wonderful you are, just how incredibly amazing you are. And once you understand that, deep within yourself, I'm not talking about bragging, saying, oh yeah, my ego is better than yours. When you actually get to know yourself deeply and you understand that essentially you are, going again a bit metaphysical, a spark of divine power that has created the universe, you just can't help but be amazed by it and be at awe, and then there is no even possibility for you to not appreciate yourself. When you realize your true essence, you don't need any more masks. You don't need to prove anything. You just understand that you've got that power already. It sleeps there. It sits there dormant, but it's there. And once you realize that, even having not yet tapped into that power, once you realize that, your attitude, your thinking, the way you feel about yourself changes completely. And you don't need any complicated techniques. You don't need to prove things. You don't need to go on a training to learn to appreciate yourself. You actually see what a wonderful power you've got. And that fills you with so much genuine admiration that the problem of low self-esteem just disappears. The thing is, all these things like low self-esteem, the lack of confidence, and all those negative things are basically like weeds in our mind, and they grow there if we allow them to grow. But we can weed them out. We can actually uproot them. And what most people don't realize, those things, those attitudes, those thoughts are not parts of who they are. So those are like weeds. Those are like bits of dirt on their skin. They can be washed off. And it's not something that should actually be even that much of a concern. They just need to find out where it sits and how to deal with it on the level of their mind. Because I think that's the quickest way really to deal with anything. Because once you realize that, everything comes from your mind, and you can fix it right there. It's like going to the bias, instead of just trying to sort things out, you just go straight into where everything comes from, just change it right there, and everything changes. So it's like that. And the other, I think it would be good to mention in connection with the PUA as well, developing that mask that makes people appear to be someone else better in their books. So they believe that having that mask make them better. What happens is people actually buy it. Many people do. And they actually think that the mask is the person. And mind you, many people do that anyway. But I think PA actually highlights it. And I think it accentuates that kind of behavior. So what happens is, when people develop that mask and they start acting that out, they start living like the mask, almost like the film, The Mask. So they start acting.
I think that's what I was thinking about.
They start living it. They start thinking that they are that personality, and little by little they actually forget, or they try to forget. You can't really forget your real self completely, but they try to forget the real self because they think the real self is weak, unworthy, too nice, too weak, to whatever. So therefore it should be shuffled away, and this new glorious self should be accepted. But because it's a mask, you can actually, if you hit it hard enough, it crumbles. And then it's a big shock for everyone around, and including that person as well, because suddenly they feel completely vulnerable and exposed, and the mask is not there. But also, unfortunately, it attracts the wrong kind of girls, because I've seen many people, and I'm not saying it's 100% rule, but I've seen many people who's been through PA training saying, yeah, I can talk to girls, I can attract girls, I can get their phone numbers, I can get successful dates, I can get all of that, but I don't really fancy any of those girls. Yes, they're really pretty, they're really hot, they're sexy, but I wouldn't want to spend more than one night with any of them, or with most of them anyway. And the reason being is because that mask gives out the wrong kind of vibes, that attracts the wrong kind of people. And the inner self, the actual self behind the mask, quietly suffers because he thinks, well, I've put so much effort into my self-development. I've paid so much. I've been to boot camps and trainings, and I've done day game, and I've done this, and I've done that, and everything I could think of, and yet I quietly suffer. And the reason for that is because even though that mask could be really impressive, they've developed over the course of their training, if it's not an actual behavior that grows from inside their mind, and there is a way to actually grow those behaviors. And I have a book called The Master of the Elements, you can check on Amazon, which shows you how to develop the behaviors you want, and actually how to scan yourself and do this healthy self-check. So you can see the contents of your mind, you can see what's lacking, you can see what's not there, and actually develop it rather than fake it. Because if you're faking something, it attracts people who are probably faking it as well. But ultimately, it feels really, really empty. And I think probably some of you will be able to relate to that. It just feels empty. You're interacting with those people, but there is no essence in it. There is always something lacking, something missing. And that missing bit is not letting out your true essence, not showing people who you really are, and therefore attracting the wrong kind of people for yourself. So,
and it's like this with everything, like with friends, and like you said, it probably say would attract more, say with these guys who do the stuff like attracting, say, low self-esteem women, or girls who probably feel, I don't deserve, this guy seems a bit weird, a bit fake, but it's what I deserve. So it's like they're a bit lowering yourself. And I guess the sort of, probably when I was doing more the dating stuff, I think I was after not necessarily those girls anyway, because that was probably what you would be getting in the nightclubs and stuff, and I wanted to get away from all that. But yeah, like you said, it's attracting ultimately the wrong people, and when you're not being yourself around, they're your best friends, aren't you? When you're fully being you're like your best friend, that's how you should be, essentially.
Exactly.
Cool. Well, I think that's been awesome. A lot of information there to digest, but I can see massively how it is to do with strengthening the mind, and I think personally as well, this is a big part of definitely the next chapter for me as well. I'll definitely be asking Jane so many questions because I'm very intrigued about all this. But Jane, any other information where they can find you? Or I mean, you've mentioned a couple of books, but do you have any blogs or videos?
Yes, definitely. So these are my books available on Amazon right now, and I have more in preparation. So I don't know if you can see it. These two. They both teach you mind mastery, different aspects of mind mastery. So you can find me on Facebook, you can find me online. My website is modernwarriormind.com, but you can also Google Warrior Mind Academy, and as I said, you can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, so feel free to come and join the community, because we are quite an interesting bunch.
Yeah, definitely. We will help you out. So thanks for tuning in. And
well, thank you, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, no problem, Jane, no problem. Okay, we'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye.